Hello and welcome to the second instalment of our Charity Spotlight series. I'm Georgia Rose, the Marketing Manager for Orphan Reach, and today I'll be speaking with Liz Curtis, the CEO and founder of the Lily Foundation. The Lily Foundation is the UK's leading mitochondrial disease charity, founded in 2007 by Liz in memory of her daughter Lily, who tragically died from mitochondrial disease at 8 months old. What began as an informal network of friends and family quickly grew into a national charity, which today supports over 900 families. The foundation is run by a small team of dedicated staff and backed by a medical board, providing vital links between patients, doctors, and medical bodies. Today, we will be discussing the incredible work they do, their latest activities, experience of clinical research, experience during the pandemic, and goals for the rest of the year. Liz, thank you so much for joining me today. Perhaps a good place to begin would be with a quick introduction of yourself and the charity's inception and how it came to function as it does today.
Hello, good morning. Thank you for having me. You've given quite a good overview already of the charity, and we set this up in memory of my daughter Lily, who passed away, as you say, at aged 8 months of a mitochondrial disease. But she was diagnosed at 7 weeks, and we didn't expect her to live such a long life after that. And it gave us those 6 months we had Lily for, gave us a real insight to just how little information was available for parents like us. There was no support network, and any information about mitochondrial disease really had been written for doctors, by doctors. And it was very, very difficult to try to get any sort of understanding as to what mitochondrial disease was, what it meant, and try to explain it to friends and family. And again, after Lily did die, and at her funeral, we asked for donations rather than flowers. And we realised there was no active charity in the UK for which to send these donations to. So it all seemed to happen and just fall into place. And following Lily's funeral and her death, we decided to set up a charity to fill a gap and to support families through the diagnostic process and their journeys, and then life after losing somebody, and that's how the charity began. But I honestly don't think that we could ever have imagined that it would have got to where we are today, supporting nearly 1,000 families throughout the UK. It's incredible, and we feel very, very lucky and very privileged to be able to do what we do.
I was going to say, did you ever see it getting to this point where you're so central to the community? That is amazing. That's so many families that you're making a difference for. It's incredible.
It does feel very odd because, as I said to you at the time, we really didn't know any other families. It was just us, and we knew there were those out there, but there was no way of us ever finding them or being put in touch with them. So
yeah. Do you think the social media and the evolution of the internet and things like that, and how central that's become to people's lives, has helped you in that respect in terms of how much you've grown with people's first base of how they research anything, and anything we get these days we look instantly to Google or to forums online? Do you think that's helped with building your awareness with families that are kind of at the start?
I hope so, yeah, absolutely, because it's the first thing that we did. Every parent, it's quite funny really, because every parent you speak to who has just got a diagnosis of mitochondrial disease, they say their first line is, "My doctor told me not to Google it."
Yeah.
But it's the first thing I did, and it was exactly the same for us even all those years ago.
Yeah, of course.
The first thing you do, you want to know everything. You want to know everything, and when you're told there's no treatment and no cure, that's really hard to believe. And the first thing you do is, well, I'll find one, because how can there not be? And you think there must be something in the world that somewhere, and that can help. And there isn't, But the first thing you do is to hit the Google, and we get a lot of families sitting at bedside saying, "My daughter, my son, has just been diagnosed. Can't believe what we've been told, and we've come across your website." All different times of day and night. I receive these emails. So Absolutely, yeah. Social media is hugely important, and helps us as well. You know, it's a huge support for us to enable to support people.
Definitely. Brilliant. I understand that the Lilly Foundation have funded research projects themselves into mitochondrial disease. How does the charity go about achieving this? Would you like to explain a little bit about your research strategy?
Of course, yeah. We have a sort of twofold research strategy, funding research into diagnostics and funding research into treatments. The diagnostics came first because personal reason, really, I suppose, in the sense that when Lily was diagnosed, doctors were 100% convinced that she had mitochondrial disease from the outset, and then the tests proved that. But we didn't get a genetic diagnosis, and we were told it would be very unlikely in our lifetime we would ever receive one because of the ways in which there was so little money and research in mitochondrial disease. I think at the time they were still testing one gene at a time. And it really resonated with me with, you know, how can you ever find a cure for something if you can't diagnose it? And I think that became a real element of what we wanted to achieve, was to make sure that families could get this diagnosis.
Yeah, because then the next step is obviously the treatment, and those things follow on after you have the
exactly
first. Yeah,
exactly. And also, even if there is no treatment and no cure, it gives options for future pregnancies and a life beyond.
Yeah.
So it was really important. And so for the first 13, 14 years, we've invested in a diagnostic project, starting with chip technology, and then evolving with science to fund an exome sequencing project.
Wow.
Linked with the highly specialised centres in the UK. And this has been hugely successful. And last year, or year before, was actually taken over by the NHS. But we're still keen to fund this area of research, and we currently fund PhD students to continue their research into looking for disease-causing genes, so that we're constantly evolving and making progress in the area.
Brilliant, that's fantastic.
And just quickly, so our second line of research is looking for treatments. Obviously, with better diagnosis, there are more confirmed patients with mitochondrial diseases, and a priority of theirs is obviously to find treatments, and that's where we are. So we're funding currently, I think, 11 projects in the UK looking for treatments for mitochondrial diseases.
Incredible. I'd say from that, obviously during the current times, through all the services and the things that you do, the research, the support that you provide, during a time where obviously isolation's been so heightened, shielding, all of these things that have impacted the rare disease community even more so than they had perhaps previously, which of your services do you feel have been most crucial to the families that you support in helping them during this time?
I think it is safe to say that our support service has been hugely busy and valued, I think. It's crucial to families anyway, and as you said, you know, especially during these times where families have been not obviously just isolated and from their own from life in general, but a lot of the support services that they would normally access have been taken away, and were taken away overnight. Yeah. So care of a child, a teenager, a parent, an adult has been 24/7 for many of these families. So not only is it emotionally exhausting, it's physically exhausting. The medical care during the pandemic as well, because a lot of the specialist doctors and nurses were redeployed. So they weren't there to answer the questions and the fear. You know, you can imagine, you suffer from a rare disease with no cure and no treatment, and a pandemic like this hits, the fear, the initial fear of what's going to happen if I get it or my child gets it. So we've been able to provide ongoing emotional support for families who have faced a diagnosis during the pandemic and not had any face-to-face talks with doctors or geneticists, and And it's been really hard. Parents have received diagnosis on a FaceTime call, and it with
Unimaginable.
no follow-up. With no follow-up of any sorts of appointments. And we've obviously had loss during the period, which has been difficult, and obviously ongoing illnesses. So we've been able to just be there for these families, and also we've been able to act like a bit of a bridge between the highly specialised services and the patients themselves.
Yeah.
So we've made sure we've kept on top of all advice relating to mitochondrial disease and the pandemic, and making sure our website is up to date. And the highly specialised services come to us with updates. We have weekly calls to make sure that all the information, it's currently around vaccinations, obviously, is up to date, and as the specialist doctors would like it to be given to, the news given to the patient.
Yeah.
So it's like
communication.
Yeah.
Improving that communication line. Brilliant.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, supporting the families you do through their journey will look different to each family. How would you say you've been able to provide the tools that these families need to navigate caring for somebody with mito during current times, but also just in general outside of COVID times?
I think it's safe to answer this question as a more general answer, really. I don't think it really makes much difference through the pandemic or not, as you say. But I think I think what we do very well at the Lily Foundation is acknowledge that everybody's journey is different.
Yeah.
We recognise that everyone who lives with mitochondrial disease also has really similar experiences.
Yeah.
So while their mitochondrial disease may be very, very different to the next person, their day-to-day experiences can be quite similar.
Okay.
So living with a disease that's rare, they're living with a disease that no one's ever heard of, they're living with a disease that you know is progressive, living with a disease that you don't know how or when that progression will happen. And at the Lily Foundation, we've built a support network of families and a forum for these families and patients to share these anxieties and these fears. And we've built it on the basis that every journey is different.
Okay.
But the belief that we can all still learn from each other and support each other.
There's those common denominators regardless of how that journey looks.
Absolutely. And I make it very, very clear to people when they join the groups that each and every child is different. And I think it's really important that people understand that. So not to compare.
Yeah, you don't want to fall down that rabbit hole, do you, of making that comparison and having false understanding of where your journey may lead. I completely see what you mean.
And we try to make it as clear as possible that really each and every individual case is completely different.
Definitely. With that, obviously, when a family starts out on their journey post-diagnosis, what would you say would be the best way for somebody to get involved with the Lily Foundation as a family in that first instance, post being given that diagnosis?
It's a really lonely and a really scary time for anyone when you first get that diagnosis. And I think we touched earlier on the whole Google front, and I think that quite often families will Google the mitochondrial disease and come up with the Lily Foundation, or their clinicians or their consultants will sort of signpost us in their direction. And it's something that we're getting much better at doing, making these relationships, building these relationships with hospitals around the UK.
Yeah,
we've got a great relationship with the highly specialised services, but it's not just the highly specialised services look after patients. So building relationships throughout the UK with consultants, and I think many families come to us via email, phone. I get a lot of phone calls, a lot of texts. Just Friday night, I had a text from a parent who's just received the diagnosis, and I think it really depends. It really depends on the family themselves. Some families find it too difficult to get in touch straight away, and I get a lot of emails going, I've been following your site for a long time, and I've just built up the courage to get in touch.
Yeah, it's part of their journey of acceptance to then reaching out for that support, and where does that come along in their journey, and it's at different points for everyone. I see what you mean.
Exactly, yeah. But they can contact us through phone, email, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We're there and responsive.
You're very
to all
accessible from all different angles, which
I hope so.
brilliant.
I hope
Yeah,
so.
it comes across that way, definitely, having looked at everything you do online, especially. Obviously, having gone through what you have done personally, in the lead up to founding the Lily Foundation, and through your journey in the last 14 years, leading the foundation to where it is today, do you find being so close to the cause personally an advantage when working towards the charity's goals, or can it be perhaps challenging at times, because obviously you can't switch off from it because it's so close to your heart?
Absolutely, yeah. No, it's very difficult to switch off.
Yeah, of course.
But I think it does help, because these goals were set by us, and pretty determined to reach them, you know. And I think I think we will. I think we can. But we are a small team. There's 4 of us now.
Yeah.
And you know, we're 5 of us, sorry, are part-time. But 3 of us have lost children, and 2 of us have been involved for a very long time, and are so passionate and driven by wanting to make things better for families, patients, and determined to find that cure and those treatments.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think when it's personal, I think it does help. And also on a practical level, when a parent phones you on a Friday evening, having just had a diagnosis, to know that you're talking to somebody who's really understands, who has been there. And it might have been some years ago, but those memories don't fade.
Of course, they don't fade at all. No.
You remember it as if it was yesterday, the words, what was said, and I think that, I hope that helps. I hope that helps.
I can imagine it does.
The person they're calling really does get it. You know, you don't just get a random person saying, yeah, someone will phone you back. It always picks up the phone.
That personal engagement, isn't it? It creates that link in a more, you're on their level from the get-go. It's not structured in a way like a big corporate company. It's the cause is so close to you all. Yeah. I can see that being a huge benefit then. Thank you.
I hope so. I really do. And I really do hope that one day, when I just can't wait for that day. In fact, not a hope, that the doctors turn around to families and say, start discussing treatment plans rather than end of life plans. And I think that that's what keeps you going. And one day we'll get there. And
yeah, definitely. It's a hugely inspiring thing to be working towards, and I can understand why you would then be finding it difficult to switch off from, and being so passionate about what you do, of course. In relation to that, and obviously wanting to get to that point where treatment plans are an option, not end of life plans, outside of your own funded research projects, how involved would you say the Lily Foundation are in promoting information about other clinical trials taking place within the community?
We have really strong links within the mitochondrial field within the UK and also abroad. It's a small community that we know is much, much stronger when we work together.
Of course.
So we talk regularly with our equivalent international patient groups and organisations, and we collaborate on research whenever we can, and whenever opportunities arise. We're currently involved in a global consortium looking at treatments into Leigh disease, for example, with Australia and America and Italy and ourselves. And we attend global conferences when we're not in the middle of the pandemic. And we're able to sort of build our international professional relationships to ensure that the global research scene is promoted to our families and our communities. When new trials arise, that we make sure that we communicate that back to our community.
Brilliant. So it's all linked up. Obviously, you're doing everything you can in that respect to ensure that nothing slips through the net and opportunities are always taken up on. Absolutely.
And we send regular newsletters out to our families and our patients, with up-to-date research that's happening throughout the world, new research trials that are coming up, and looking for patient engagement.
With that in mind, how do you feel in the last 14 years, in your experience, trial information and research opportunities have been communicated? Do you feel like that has evolved over time? Like, I know you just said, obviously you have your newsletters, you have your means of, educating your community on what's available and what's out there at the moment. But do you feel there has been progress in this area from the clinical side as well as from the charity side in terms of how information is provided and available to the community?
Yes, I think there's been a huge shift in the last 14 years. 14 years ago, there seemed to be no trial opportunities, really limited research. And we worked really hard to make sure that any relevant papers, relevant papers are shared with the mitochondrial disease community. And also, they can sometimes be very difficult to understand. Yeah. So we'll spend quite a bit of time making sure that they are, can be understood and read by the layman. We understand that a lot of research papers are very difficult to read, and we spend quite a lot of our time translating these papers so that the layman can read and understand them, and know what they're about.
Yeah, to making them more accessible. I can imagine it to be quite overwhelming if you didn't create that additional support by picking them apart for somebody just to read. You would just sort of be at a loss to try and translate that to what that means for you as a family, handling your journey with the disease.
Absolutely, yeah.
With that in mind, what do you think about the trial setting itself and the experience that families are taking from being in that trial setting? Do you feel like the Mito families are well informed of the process and what to expect when taking part in a trial? Like, is that communicated effectively in layman's terms?
We think here at the Lilly Foundation that the orphan drug developers are becoming increasingly aware of the importance of patient involvement in trial design. I think that badly designed trials won't retain the numbers that are needed to gain useful results. So I think we're frequently and more frequently being asked to look and to give feedback in the early process of trial designs, to make sure that these trials are realistic for patients. And I think that's hugely important. And I think that this means that it's much easier for patients to take part. And we can then translate again, making them more accessible from an early stage, making sure that patients are very clear of what is required of them right at the beginning, so that they can take part throughout. And then I think it helps to keep numbers.
I was going to say retention. You can imagine that helps with retention a lot, definitely. You sort of answered my next question, but do you think the support available currently for organisations like yourself and parents in relation to the clinical setting is enough at the moment? Do you think more could be done in terms of how that support materialises?
I think it's obviously improving, but everything that we do on a voluntary basis.
Of course.
So we don't often get offered any incentive by drug developers to help with trial design or patient recruitment or accessibility of information. So it would be good to have some sort of financial support as part of the trial and drug designs from the beginning, I think, and make it much more as part of the whole project.
The
whole process that charities can to build it in, rather than it be an extra job to do. It could be something that's built into how we work, and
the strategy from the start of how it's going to be implemented and rolled out. I see what you're saying.
Yeah, rather than, oh, let's give the charity a quick call, see if they can help. That should be almost part, as you say, a part of the process.
Yeah, not an afterthought or something later down the line. It needs to be earlier in that process, and it helps everybody that way. With that, from an orphan drug development point of view, in terms of educational resources for the rare disease community in relation to their role within the process of drug development, do you think there is enough of that? Do you think the understanding is there of what clinical research organisations do within that process? Obviously, I know you've said earlier about the research papers being quite technical and them needing to be unpicked for layman terms. Do you think something like that is currently available already in terms of understanding the process of research? And trials create hope. Without that hope, obviously it's hard to feel positive and to see that future plan of the treatment plan that we discussed. But is there that understanding, do you think, at a base level of what that process looks like to market access to an approved drug?
I think for patients and families, often the first question that a family will ask is, are there any clinical trials? Okay. My child's just been diagnosed, are there any clinical trials happening? Mm-hmm. People are keen, they're eager to get involved, and I think that where it falls down is that lack of information of how involved a clinical trial can be. Yeah. I touched on it before. I think engaging early with patient groups, really explaining what's going to be involved and making sure that before you even start to recruit. So just really engaging at that very early stage with patients.
And that would really improve their experience, wouldn't it?
And a really good way, exactly. And I think a really good way of engaging with patient groups is through animation. A short video or animation as to what the trial is, what we want to achieve, how it might help them would be really useful. Attending patient conferences, making research and patients more embedded with each other, and giving patients an opportunity to ask questions about research, making it much more patient-facing.
Orientated,
and really, so patients can really understand what research is, and what it entails. Because I think we all see the word research, don't we? It's all there's there, and it's exciting and it brings hope, as you say. However, it's also can be a very long process. Yeah. And I think that we could do more for families and patients.
Educate on the realities of what it will look like opposed to what it may seem like, because like you say, it is a long process and there are different points of data analysis that then impact how long that process continues to be. And obviously the stages of research, there's so much to understand that I completely understand what you're saying in regards to digestible content for the patient. It would be integral to keeping that understanding, and like you said before, that would really impact patient retention as well. So it seems beneficial for both parties that understanding is there and that effort almost is there to kind of educate from the outset, not at a later point in the process.
Yeah, see what you're saying. Rather than someone giving up all their time and then going, so what's happening with that project? Oh yeah, well, we now need to do stage 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and 7 before we get it. I think it's really important. Also, as we touched on, grant funding for charities to get involved to help with patient recruitment and education. And finally, to develop sort of maybe campaigns, and information for small charities to use to educate our patients. So something that we can take to our conferences, that we could sort of share and develop with our patient communities.
Do you think that lack of education or understanding is one of the key barriers to trial participation for some patients? Because like we said with the research papers, if they're overwhelming, I'm pretty sure then participating in something related to that would be extremely overwhelming without that understanding. So do you feel like that is a key barrier to you know, signing up to a trial? And if not, what would you say the key barriers are for lots of patients?
I think it's probably a key barrier to retention. Okay. I think recruitment, I think people are keen to be involved, people are keen to help research, people are keen to push research forward. I think one of the key issues for patients in our community especially is that many trials involve a lot of patient participation, and that can be quite difficult for patients. Travelling to and from centres for the research to happen, you know, for various stages of the research. And I think patients, especially with mitochondrial disease, if you travel to and fro, back and forth in a day, you can often be out for days in terms of the impact and the impact of that journey or that day. And I think that really does have is an issue with retention of patients in trials. Mm-hmm. So yeah, maybe more education around that. And I think something that's happened, especially through the pandemic, in order for some trials to continue, they've had to be home-based. So they've had to find a way in which to be able to continue the trials and assessments in the patient's home. Mm-hmm. And that might be something that can be carried forward now, and it probably would never have happened without the COVID pandemic. Yeah. But it has happened, and with families, you know, patients have found new ways of which to speak with their doctors. There's teleconferences now, you know, patient consultations over the phone is now very, very normal. Mm-hmm. And it's not something that would have ever happened before. I think it was starting up, but I think it's something
propelled it forward in a bigger way. So everybody positive to take.
Yeah, absolutely. Not used to having to use Zoom or whatever platform people use, whereas before it's like, I can't do that, you know, I've never used computers, whereas now it's very much more of an everyday.
Definitely.
Tool.
I see what you're saying. Obviously with that, it's been a challenging year, especially for the rare disease community. What challenges have you seen the mito community face in addition to their daily battles during the pandemic?
I would say it's definitely been anxieties around information that's come from probably our daily briefings. The shielding, who should be shielding, when they should be shielding, you know, that whole initial wave of shielding, it was just really unclear as to who it was directed at. Yeah. And it wasn't communicated in a very coherent way, and even some specialised services were confused. You know, some families got letters, some didn't. Some got a letter from Matt Hancock, and it just created this huge, great big fear factor.
Panic in the moment, especially with that. Yeah.
I've got mitochondrial disease, I haven't got a letter, or I have got mitochondrial disease, I've got a letter, but my sister hasn't. You know, it was a really difficult period to try and manage, because everyone was asking us questions. What do we do? Can I do this? Can I go to work? Can my kids go to school? Can the siblings go to school? You know, it all just became, it was all quite difficult. And I think it just had that knock-on effect throughout, and I think it created real anxiety and upset within the community. You know, shielding and then coming out of shielding was the same. It was the same problem. Can we, can't we? I've been told to shield, I've been told not to shield, and then back into shielding. So I think that lack of clarity had been really difficult for people to come to terms with. I think that's probably their main
one.
And not being able to access medical care, and for those who have got seriously ill children, and would normally get overnight care and support during the day. All of that was just taken away, and support networks from families just disappeared overnight. So families have just been left completely on their own.
Yeah, with the added bonus of uncertainty and, like you say, lack of clarity of how to handle your day-to-day life outside of your condition. It's incredible to see the resilience within the community in general day to day, but then throw this into the mix as well, and it's unbelievable how people have adapted in the face of such adversity. And I think obviously that's a credit to each rare disease family of how they've managed through this time, but it's also such a real shame that added element of isolation and support has been non-existent due to a number of factors. Do you feel like out of the back of that going forward, the long-term impact, what do you feel that will look like?
I mean, I think the long-term impact of COVID in general is gonna be worrying. I think we know that just by looking at the news and listening to the mental health charities.
Yeah.
And we're currently looking to secure grants for a psychological program to support our young people, families and adults over the next few years, because I think it's been quite terrifying, I think. And you speak to families who are actually petrified to go past their front gate.
Yeah.
If anybody walks past or walks near, it's that fear. The fear is just, and trying to get over that now is, when they've been literally shielding for a year, is going to
small steps, isn't it? Yeah.
It's going to take some time, and for families to have that trust, I think, in I mentioned a bit earlier about siblings and going to school. During this time, there's been siblings that have not been to school at all because they've got a sick child at home, or if they have, they've moved out of the home. They've moved to live with a grandparent so they can go to school. And I think that they're going to have long-term effects, I think, on families and households.
Hard for, obviously, from a charity stance to have enough resource to support all of these additional needs and worries. I know obviously we previously spoke about the issue of funding and service delivery during the pandemic being high on the list of concerns for the Lilly Foundation. Would you say these have been your biggest challenges as an organisation in the last year, or if not, what would you say have been?
I think funding's probably been our most concerning and biggest worry. We get all of our funding from events that we run as ourselves, and individuals who do sponsored events, all of which were cancelled overnight. So for the last year, we haven't been able to put on an event, or marathons and half marathons and swims and cycle rides that people had planned have just been completely non-events.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, people have been incredible and found different ways to fundraise, but on a completely different scale.
Yeah.
So I think our priority is to try and stay afloat, keep our heads above water. But I think that's been our biggest challenge as a charity.
Yeah.
And as you say, supporting the families, we've started having weekly coffee mornings, on virtual coffee mornings, and for a certain group of people, it's a lifeline of the week. They look forward to it. They look forward to seeing each other. They talk about what they've watched on telly, how they've watched Netflix non-stop for the last year, and what programs they've seen. Yeah. And it's just someone else to talk to who understands the challenges that they face.
Definitely. Would you say, obviously, moving virtual with your coffee mornings and the different ways you've approached fundraising, are they the key ways that you've had to adapt your service to deliver what you need to families? Obviously, the internet has been the lifeline throughout the pandemic for everyone when it comes to communication, but obviously for you, your services for families, but then also your goals for fundraising, obviously, have they both been affected in the same way, where you've had to adapt to deliver in a virtual capacity for everything?
Yes, definitely. And we did we started in May last year our weekly quizzes, which were hugely popular, and especially with our families, it brought everyone together. Every year pre-COVID, we ran a family weekend, so we bring all the families that we work with together to a hotel for the weekend. And so amazing friendships have been made during those weekends, which are long-lasting, sort of lifelong friends. So, you know, these weekly Zoom, these weekly quizzes were hosted by celebrity hosts. We had Josh Widdicombe, we had I can't think now. John Alex
Just name anyone, we'll believe you, don't worry.
Joe Brand, and these quizzes just were funny, and they brought people together, and they used to write to each other in the chat. And we did those weekly and then monthly for some time. And I think they helped a little bit financially, but most importantly, it was Thursday night quiz night, and everyone get looking forward to it, and get around the telly, and it was really good fun. And I think that it's really helped keep people sane, keep community sane.
It's that social aspect of life. We're social beings, and being isolated is so out of character for so many, that those lifelines to communicate with people, like a set time over a topic of something that's fun, not just talking about COVID. I can imagine that have been so valuable.
And actually something that we've never done before. And in a time where we've all been so separated, we've also never been so together. And
that's lovely.
It has been really good. It's been really nice, and we've managed to maintain that. The Lily families, they call themselves the Lily family. So we've managed to maintain the Lily family vibe through a time where we could easily not have done. And it's been an incredible learning curve, I think, for us all. But
with that, what positive changes do you think you'll carry forward post pandemic in the way that the foundation operates?
Well, as a charity, we've always all been home based, so we have never had an office. We've all worked from home, and fortunately that was something we didn't then have to change. And which might have broken us, but so that was lucky. But I definitely think that this virtual meetups, the coffee mornings, the quiz nights, won't do them as regularly, but they were fun. And we had our first online comedy event just a couple of weeks ago, and it was just, it's not the same as being in a real live comedy store in London, but it was a really good opportunity just to have a bit of a laugh and to do things that, do something that we couldn't do normally. So that was really good fun.
I think with that, the things you put on become even more accessible to those that can't travel somewhere or do something. So you reach more people with your efforts in that way, and that's a brilliant positive to take from the situation.
And absolutely. And people from everywhere. So we have people in Glasgow and Cornwall and Devon joining our coffee mornings. And I think that's been really, really, really lovely to be able to reach people and be there and just provide that element of support throughout.
It's fantastic. So we're coming towards the end now, but I'd just like to ask you what your goals are for the Lily Foundation for the rest of 2021 and your key focuses for the year. I
think anybody in our position would say our key focus is to keep our heads above water and to stay afloat. When in April last year, I remember sitting around having a meeting with the team saying, we have to just ride this out. It's not going to be easy, and we have to find ways in which, we have to just continue to stay with our heads above water and see this pandemic out. Obviously, in April, we didn't expect to still be in the same situation a year later.
No, of course.
So it is a challenge, but equally, research has recommenced, and it had a bit of a pause, but that's really positive. It's really positive news. So Our research projects are back up and running.
Fantastic.
And yeah, we're just keeping giving that element of hope, you know, that we talked about earlier to families and those who suffer. And yeah, just being here.
Yeah.
I mean, that's to get through is our aim, I think.
That's a brilliant kind of focus to have. And of course, with the funding element of things and applying for different grants and opportunities, and hopefully with restrictions reducing, some sort of in-person physical fundraising events can start up again at some point this year for you. And I'd just like to give you the opportunity, is there anything that you want to flag as that's going on this year where people can support you?
Absolutely. We've just launched last week a Commit to Knit campaign. So we are encouraging people to knit or crochet lily butterflies that we are hoping will take over the UK at some point during the year.
Okay, brilliant.
You can sign up on our website. It costs £10 to sign up, and you get a crochet kit delivered, which includes some wool, some knitting patterns and crochet patterns, and a crochet hook. Brilliant. And you get knitting.
Fantastic.
Crocheting. That's our. It's something that we thought could be accessible to those who aren't sporty, because we do quite a lot of virtual sports events and things, but also bringing a community together again through a shared passion, or a new shared passion for many, and hoping that we can sort of do something positive and give people who don't have much to do something to focus on.
Definitely, brilliant. Well, I will tag that and share the links to your website and resource pages and your social media at the bottom of this interview. And we will, of course, be sharing this across all our own channels to raise some awareness for the Lily Foundation. So thank you so much for your time and for such an insightful conversation. And hopefully this will help some people.
Thank you.
You're welcome.